Hello and welcome everyone to week 3 of social media analytics and email campaigns. This week we're going to be talking about web analytics and dashboards. We're just going to do an intro to web analytics just to get everybody prepared for next week when we do a really good deep dive. So what we'll be covering this week in specific, we're going to talk about dashboards and why we use them. We're also going to take a look at a few dashboard examples, both operational and KPI versions. And we're also going to talk about how to use your dashboards wisely so you can really get the most out of them in the most efficient and effective way as possible. Then we're going to do our intro into web analytics, which will prepare us for our lecture next week. Then our discussion for the week and a summary of assignment 2. So why do we use dashboards in our industry? That's the key focus for this next discussion. We use dashboards primarily because it can bring our information together into one place. It can really simplify so many different things for us on a consistent basis. So specifically though, dashboards help us visualize multiple metrics simultaneously. So you can bring in your metrics from multiple platforms. You can bring in the numbers from Facebook, the numbers from Twitter, the numbers from LinkedIn, and you can see them all in one place. Also, dashboards, some of them, can allow for you to highlight your KPIs and to very easily confirm if your tactics and the work you're doing on social and online is helping you meet those goals in your KPIs. Also, frequently and really good dashboards tools can help you pull together reports efficiently and effectively. And it helps you be able to quickly take a glance at those numbers you're reporting on, but also can help you automate a lot of the process of reporting so you're using your time as effectively as possible. So we're going to talk about two different types of dashboards. There are our KPI dashboards and our operational dashboards. So KPI dashboards highlight key metrics that help you measure your goals. So just like we defined KPIs and we discussed KPIs versus measurements versus metrics, what the dashboard does for you is it brings in enough information that you can clearly understand in one place if you are meeting your goals for your KPIs. Operational dashboards highlight key metrics that help you measure your tactics. So it's bringing in that information that says, did that campaign content work? Did that piece of content work? Did this email campaign work? It doesn't bring in that information like conversion, for example, that you may need to confirm if you're meeting your goals for your KPIs. That's the difference between your KPI dashboards and your operational dashboards, is that one can bring as much information as possible together that you can really say, yes, we are meeting our KPIs, we're hitting those KPIs. Others cannot bring in that information, but they can tell you if your tactics are working. So it depends on what number you're trying, or your numbers, sorry, that you're trying to consistently monitor and report on. So let's show some examples to really clarify what we're talking about and bring a visual example to best explain what we're talking about. The first example is Facebook Insights. So anyone who has had access to a Facebook business page and could look at the insights is familiar with this screen grab I have here. This example is a part of the entirety of the Facebook dashboard that shows, in this case, the 5 most recent posts. So this dashboard is considered operational because it's very tactical. It's only showing information on a tactical level. What that means is we can see here our reach, we can see our engagement, we can see post clicks, but we can't see if once they made it to the website, how long did they spend there? What was the bounce rate? Where did they go next? Did they buy something? Did they donate? These are all the things that would then be, at that point, a KPI dashboard that could show you if you're meeting those KPIs. But in this case, this information is very tactical and provides an operational understanding of what works. Now, if a KPI that has been set by, the higher ups or your team is reach, you can quickly take a look at this, and as somebody savvy and experienced, you can say, okay, we are on track at first glance to meet our goals for reach. But it cannot perfectly tell you that. It cannot give you a cumulative for your reach on this particular dashboard example. So this is really intended to be something that's used by people in a tactical level that need to just check in and keep an eye on things, or from a monitoring perspective, for you to go and look to see that engagement's happening there and what posts you should be keeping an eye on. What I really like about the dashboard of Facebook Insights is that you can really easily click these individual posts and see more specific insight down to the nitty-gritty of those individual pieces of content. And if you're somebody that is very focused on the details and the content and the tinkering of the phrasing and the images, it's great to have a lot of data on one particular post. Unfortunately, I just have a screen grab here, but as you start to experiment with the backends and the dashboards, make sure you're clicking every available link and exploring to see what kind of information is available to you and what you will find valuable. On our next slide here, we have the backend of Twitter Insights and another operational dashboard example. So here, once again, similar to Facebook, we can see what impressions were there, what were the engagements. In this case, they do provide an engagement rate. Also, you can get a better understanding of what's happening overarching. So we have the total of impressions that my tweets have earned in the last 28-day period. So once again, if impressions were one of your goals or tactical goals or a KPI or a metric you need to keep an eye on, this is really great because you can, at a quick glance, know if you're trending towards meeting that goal, or if you're going to completely miss the mark. Also, some other numbers that could be important from a KPI and a tactical perspective are things like engagement rate. So if engagement rate has been determined as a KPI for whatever the business reason is, you can once again keep an eye on it here and think, okay, we're getting close, we're so far off, whatever the case may be. Now, once again, this technically does not give you a result on a KPI conversion level. So that's why this would still be considered an operational dashboard. An engagement rate, like I mentioned, could be a KPI as you've set with your business standards, but it doesn't tell you anything else past that. An example would be here, it tells you there's 28 link clicks, but what happened when they got to the website? Did they purchase? Did they stay long? Did they read more? Whatever the final KPI was intended to be. So that's why these are very much almost like surface level in your metrics, but cannot really tell the whole story that you need to tell in terms of a KPI value and result. I have one more example for you, the Pinterest Insights. So this is once again another example of an operational dashboard. So now Pinterest can provide some understanding of link clicks to your website if it was hooked up here, as you can see, but still cannot give you that deep nitty-gritty of the sales at that point. You would have to start using links and pixels and have a KPI dashboard that would bring all that together to say, okay, where did they start in the sales funnel? Was it from this pin from March 18th? Did they click it? They made it to the website. What did they do when they got to the website? What was their process? How did they get to the sales page? And then the point of purchase. So there are KPI dashboards that we're going to get into that can track the conversion process. And there's a lot of sales funnel tools out there that can take these social media metrics and then bring it to the last point of sale. So you may find that you'll have to do research for the business you're working with to find the tool that's best for your needs and also in a really great price point. But you can also take this kind of information, these metrics and these tracking pieces, and monitor it yourself and piece the story together. On this next slide, we have Sprout Social. So this is where we can stop and look and try to question, is it an operational or a KPI dashboard? Sprout is great from definitely an operational standpoint. I've been using it for years because it is an all-around service in that it provides tools for scheduling, for monitoring, and for reporting. So if that is what you need a tool for, then Sprout is definitely something I recommend looking into. You can bring in multiple different platforms, like you can bring in information from Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and even Pinterest too now. And you're getting the operational data. So here in this initial dashboard, you see there's the scheduled messages and queue messages that you could set up, what sent messages went through. You can see what the daily engagements look like for different accounts, which is great. Once again, if you need to monitor daily engagements as like a metric or tactical goal, and you need to make sure that you're not going to miss the mark, it's great to get to check into this as frequently as possible. And it can really be a great tool for that ongoing management of your pages and your reporting, because they do have a pretty in-depth reporting tool that you can easily export for you to use internally, or you can take the key numbers you need and put it together into a report that suits your business and your goals best. But once again, it could not bring in that conversion data you might need. So it can't connect to Google Analytics and to pixel trackers and understand if people made it from your social post to a point of sale. It cannot tell that full sales data story as an example, or did they make it to the point of signing up for some sort of service. Sprout cannot tell that story, but it can provide a lot of the reporting that you may need if your only objective is to report on the results on social specifically. And another example of a tool that does this is Hootsuite. So Hootsuite can bring in a lot of that data from multiple different social media platforms, can really give you this quick insight into, where is the engagement coming from, how many mentions are your accounts receiving, what, even like down to sentiment and these other reporting metrics that you may need. And there is a free version that you can really get a lot of data from and continue to add on certain pieces until you build the report you need. But once again, an example of a tool that cannot bring in that full conversion process to report for the end all like business KPI goals. But very useful from a like scheduling content perspective, from a reporting perspective, and a community management perspective. So making sure that all mentions are handled and engaged with, and any potential comments that need attention are addressed. So I'm a really big fan of Sprout in particular, but Hootsuite is also a really great platform from a social media management perspective. If the only goal in your capacity is to manage social media and manage social media goals, and these KPIs can be reported on in other ways, in other capacities within the business, then these are both really good examples that can bring you a lot of that data that you need on a daily and weekly basis. So what are the benefits of social dashboards? So like I mentioned, they can bring in all of your stats for social all in one place. And that just really saves a lot of time if you are working in an agency model that you're monitoring and working with a lot of different accounts for different brands that have, 3 to 4 profiles each. It's such a relief to bring it all into one place that you can always come to. But also, even if you're handling just 4 accounts for one business and it's part of an overarching marketing capacity, can really simplify your day to day and save a lot of time to have all this information in one place. And it really does give you this bird's eye tactical view. So when you're coming in and you need the numbers and you need to know if this is working as like efficiently as possible so you can make effective change, these tools can bring that to you all in one place. It's fantastic. What's also great, like I mentioned, is they're usually part of social media management tool. So when you're managing multiple accounts on a day-to-day, having everything in one place with one login can really simplify a lot of things. And what's great about tools like Sprout in particular, and I know this just because of the experience with it, I'm just going to go back to that slide where you see the sent messages. And the tasks here on the left side, you can, if you have multiple team members, you can assign certain tasks to other team members. So an example would be if you are managing a new team member who is helping you schedule and produce content, they can have you approve the content before it's fully scheduled for launch. So they assign the task to you to approve the post, and then you click approve, and on the scheduled date it will be posted. Or if there's a comment that needs to be dealt with by, let's say it's your sales team member, then you can schedule a task to that team member. They'll get an email notification and they can go into the tool and respond. And it tracks all the responses from these different team members, and it can even give you a report at the end of the month of how many messages your team has dealt with, which if you're working with high volume, that could end up being a KPI that you are responding to 99% of the comments that come through. So we'll just go back to the benefits of the dashboard. So like I mentioned, brings all this information to one place for you. Great tactical view, tactical information, and the added layer of it being a social media management tool. All of this will simplify your day-to-day with social media. But of course, there is something missing here. So these tools cannot align your social metrics to KPIs like conversion and signups and KPIs that are with information that needs to be tracked through web analytics and pixels. It also doesn't give any information outside of the social platform. So that's what I mean by things like those additional analytics. It can't bring in things like Google Analytics, those pixels, to piece the whole story together in your behalf. So that's why you can't get that final KPI number within these platforms. But I do think they have a world of benefit if you are just managing the social day to day, and then there's some other reporting body that is supporting on piecing together the whole thing. But if you do need to be reporting on KPIs within one dashboard, what does that mean in this case? It means that we're taking the metrics and the definition of the KPIs, and it's telling that story all in one place. So it's saying, okay, because we got this many link clicks and they made it to the website, and then this many of them purchased, and that, let's say that last goal was like 20% conversion coming from social, it can tell you that you met 20 or, hopefully surpassed it. But that only happens with a KPI reporting tool. Those other dashboards I show you are not at that capability level. There is ways to pull it all together through Excel and Google spreadsheets and numbers. And, there's a lot of templates out there online. But the point of this part of the lecture was to see that there are tools out there that can help with the entirety of it and really simplify a lot of the ongoing reporting. The paid services in particular are really where it gets to this level that you are reporting at a higher level and a more efficient level, because there's so much that they provide, and there's data that you can never piece together manually because there's just not enough hours in the day that these tools can report on. So let's look at some of these paid tools as an example. So here's a dashboard for Radian 6. Radian 6 was actually founded by Canadians and was then sold to Salesforce, which is a massive content management software. They're huge, with like thousands of or millions, I'm sure by now, of people who have like interacted with it and used it. What's great about Radian 6 is that it brings everything together, and it makes it one of the best tools in pulling in data from multiple sources, analyzing it, and then putting it back to understanding what it means from a social metric perspective, then into the data perspective, or the KPI data perspective. This is a really expensive tool now, and I think it always was. So unfortunately, we can't get access for us in the course to jump in and test it out. But so for now, I can provide some look at it through this screen grab here. So in this particular example, we have mentions being tracked in the top left here for different types of cars. So we have like the Civic and like a Navigator, all these different options. And so what's happening here is the mentions are being tracked clearly because this is something in the auto industry that they're tracking these mentions to understand which are the most popular in social media conversation. And so this could be connected to some sort of larger KPI. So maybe the larger KPI is that they want a certain share of voice in media and social. And share of voice is when the number of mentions of a particular brand in any sort of chatter, from publications to blogs to influencers and then into social. So here they're tracking these mentions, and this could be an important goal to be reporting on because maybe the goal is that a campaign was launched that would spark social media chatter, and then that's all connected to the goal of that campaign, whether that campaign worked on a tactic level, and then did that then translate into sales. We also have certain phrases tracked at the bottom left here. So when it's pulling together these word clouds, what's great about these is it's usually associated to another phrase. So if we're tracking civic and then all the words associated to civic on Twitter, what are we getting? And that could really be important from a sentiment perspective. So if you're aiming for the brand to be at a certain level of sentiment, be it in like the 94% and up, positive sentiment, then these words can really help confirm and monitor and understand what conversation is being had around the civic. It can also tell you from, let's say, a research and development perspective, if people are tweeting saying, I wish the civic had this, and this in all these different discussions, and there was a repetition and a pattern from a research and development perspective, you could then bring that to that team and say, look, this is what we're telling you is happening on social. And so maybe one of the goals for the year or maybe a couple years was to better listen to what the people and the brands of Honda want and have that reflected in research and development and then into future cars. In the middle portion here on the top, we're seeing what the mentions are. And it's really important that the mentions that we had on the left in terms of the number could also be drilled down into, what is literally being said in these mentions. So of course this is important that it's not just like, great, we got 1,000 mentions. Like, wait a minute, what were the 1,000 mentions about? We would hope that 1,000 mentions were not negative, or maybe like less than a third or a tenth of them are only negative. But also, like I said, it could be a goal for the brand to be monitoring what kind of discussion is happening around the brand and around competitor brands to understand, what needs to change, whether it be a marketing perspective or a capability perspective of the car. On the top right over here, what I really like about this is it's mentioning the publications or blogs that are mentioning the brand. This is really great, especially when you're thinking about from a potential influencer perspective. It's always great to know if an influencer is organically mentioning a brand because they're more likely to want to partner with you. So these dashboards can pull in this information, but even better, when you're partnering with influencers, you can give them, custom links, just like we had done in a previous lecture, and track the sales that are coming through from their post onto the website. So this is just an example of some of what Radian6 can do. They can actually piece together the whole sales conversion story because of the way the platform was initially built, and then especially because of part of being as part of Salesforce now. Now, this is no longer just a standalone product. It's part of the Salesforce umbrella of products, or the Salesforce cloud. So I wish that we could really jump in and we could show, what the whole thing can really provide for us. So unfortunately, this is all I can really show you because this is what we had access to. But it's just to get an idea of like how deep the data can really get in these KPI dashboards. Another example that I've gotten to use a while back is Sysimo. So we have an example here of HBO's back end of their Sysomos. Now, Sysomos reports on a lot of similar pieces of information in terms of those like that word cloud type of content. We also see, the mentions in terms of the language discussions happening here, hashtags accompanying any mention of HBO, which could be really important from a trend perspective. Also, like what age groups are talking about, HBO, the gender, the most important accounts, once again, because it can provide that kind of influencer type of data. So this is all just a really deeper level of reporting, but they also are a tool that has so much data that you can piece together that KPI information. Once again, Sysomos is another very expensive example. They cost over $100,000 a year, but they can tell the story of what was the process from a conversion perspective from point A to point Z. And they also do provide a lot of this social information. So it really can be that all-in-one tool that some companies need. So we just took a look at operational and KPI dashboards, and now let's talk about what it means to actually dashboard wisely, because you want to make sure you're getting the most out of the dashboards that you set up, so that you're not, essentially either paying out funds that you don't need to be paying for these tools, or you're not building something that's not going to perform for you in the way that you need it to. So first of all, to set up a great dashboard and to set yourself up for success in marketing in general, you want to make sure that your goals specific. So you're always thinking about your goals. What does every single thing you're doing mean when you get back to the goal? A lot of teams will have the goals printed loud and proud throughout the office. I know that when I've started out with an account, I set the goals from the beginning so that I know and the client knows what I'm working towards and it's never in question. But even for yourself, when you're building these dashboards, you have to remember what are the numbers that I'm supposed to be working towards so that it's working for you. You don't want to bog yourself down with these other numbers that you don't necessarily need at the touch of your fingertips. Of course, there's going to be tactical numbers that you're going to need, so tactic-specific metrics, but you want to make sure that there's a clear definition for yourself when you're looking at these dashboards so that you're getting both the goal information that you need, but then also the tactics on those or the metrics on those tactics you're running so that you're focusing on both. Because one really does support the other. The tactics support your goals, or at least they should. And this way, when you're ready to report on them, you're always clear and concise on what you're talking about. And to be clear and concise on your reporting, you need to clearly understand your reporting responsibilities. So like I mentioned, when I start with a client, it's a very set, clear expectations. What are the goals and what are our goals on social media? How are we going to achieve them? And what are the numbers I'm going to report back to you on? This way, the expectations are always perfectly clear. You will find that the clients or other team members will not be clear on what they think they should be reporting on. They could be sitting there thinking they only care about Facebook fan growth. And you're going to sit there and tell them that is not a KPI that we need to be focusing on. That is not where our goals are. And you have to have that discussion so that it's very clear what your reporting responsibilities are so you can make sure your dashboard is meeting the responsibilities that you need it to. Also, check regularly. So I'm checking in on reporting almost daily because I'm using a tool like Sprout that also happens to be my content management tool. So because it's all in one, I'm also checking in to see, okay, like how are we doing the last couple of days? Was that what I was expecting in terms of engagement? Was I expecting more clicks? Did we want to see more positive comments? So I'm always aware, but that's because the tool happens to simplify that process for me. But you don't need to be in there every single day, multiple times a day. You can check on a regular schedule, be it you put an hour in every Monday or Friday to set yourself up for success. Or maybe you check twice a week. Whatever you need to check in on your activities to make sure that you're pacing to meet your goals. Also, it's very important to be comparing the numbers and looking at them and know that the numbers are comparing to work for you. So numbers that need to work together or tell a story together should be there together, so you're comparing them and understanding them. But also a tool that can tell you how are you doing last month versus this month. And setting up your dashboard to tell that to you also, because maybe you had like an exemplary month in January, let's say, and then February is struggling. You need to know that so you either can find the solution or at least have the explanation. But the sooner you can tell that kind of data, the better you can manage and course correct if needed. So we're just going to get into our intro to web analytics. So the point of this piece of the lecture is to set everybody up for success for next week, because there is a few tasks you'll need to do to prep. So website analytics means that we are going to measure website performance, but there's two assumptions tied to measuring that performance. The first assumption is that your website performance is linked to your business goals. So if you have a website that is bringing in sales for you, bringing in signups, bringing in reach outs to your business, these are all business goals that you are aiming for. So your website performance has to be linked to your business goals in order for us to really truly track and measure website analytics. Now, the second assumption is your social activities are linked to your website and your business goals. So this means that, like, from a literal perspective, your social media content and tactics and ads are pushing to your website so you can be reporting on them, but also from an overall business perspective, the efforts you're putting in on social, the goal is to meet a business goal with those tactics. And it's really important to have some experience or some understanding of how website analytics works, because we're seeing more and more employers, especially in the marketing world, expecting people to have an understanding of website analytics, specifically Google Analytics. It really has become a must-have in the marketing world. It is the go-to platform, partially because it's free, but also because it is one that people have become the most comfortable with and provides a lot of great information. So setting up Google Analytics on your site, I would say it's definitely straightforward, but not necessarily easy. It really does depend on how familiar you are with your website platform. So that's why I recommend, if you can, as soon as possible, or before you start with the next lecture, make sure you set up your Google Analytics account if you haven't already. Like I mentioned in the previous lecture, if you do not have a website, you can use a Twitter account or just google.com just to get your account set up. Your Twitter profile link, just to get your account set up so you can get in there and start to work with the tool a little bit and get a better understanding. As soon as you set up your account, you're going to get your Google Analytics ID. So save that ID. You can easily access it again through the platform, but that is the ID that we'll need for like our next steps and for next week. And then you will need to set up that code into a website or a page you plan to track. So most websites, they're starting to simplify the process of adding in your Google Analytics tracking ID, because it was such a hassle for so many people that were not that comfortable with different backend platforms, and if you were not comfortable with HTML. So with more and more websites offering very simple services to build a website, they've really simplified this process also. But I have a couple examples here. WordPress, similar to Google Analytics, has become very much like the go-to, but on the website development and then blog development side, I've worked with so many brands that had already set up with WordPress. That's because it's really easy to use from a publishing perspective, but it's also great, I think, as a base for web developers in particular. So on the WordPress side, into your appearance tab, and you're editing your theme on HTML, every page of your website has header information that explains how the page will look and how the information is displayed on that page and what information needs to be parlayed outside of that particular website. So unfortunately, WordPress for the free or lower end paid accounts do not provide a really simple solution for pasting in your Google Analytics tracking, but Google Analytics provides this tracking code that you then have to go and paste into your header of the pages you plan to track. So it has to go above the code at the end that closes your head. Or your header, I should say, excuse me. So if this isn't enough in terms of if you're not like savvy enough with code, there's so many online tutorials on how to paste that code into your WordPress HTML. And I would definitely encourage Googling them and following some YouTube video examples. But in some of their paid accounts, they make the whole process so much easier that they provide this very easy drop your ID in and we'll do it for you type of method that I know I've gotten to use, and it's really made my life a little bit easier. Squarespace is a paid-only platform, I believe, and they're fairly affordable. So if you're working with a client that needs to build a website that looks clean, professional, and is very simple to use, Squarespace could be a really great resource to use. I definitely recommend looking into them. They don't have a lot of plugins, but they do have a really simple way to add in your Google Analytics ID, as you can see here. So you would literally just drop that ID number that we mentioned earlier into place. It plugs it into the code. You are good to go. It's just so simple and so easy. Weebly is another example of a website platform that makes it really simple to add your header code in there, so you can see there. So this would be something you would pull from Google Analytics and you drop here. So once again, depending on whatever website platform you're working with, I would turn to Google and find and search for your website platform and then Google Analytics ID. And what's great is that there's so much information out there. There's so many kind strangers that went and explained how to do this in, text form, in podcast form, in webinar form, and on YouTube. So really take advantage. So, search your platform and like inserting Google Analytics ID and see what you come up with, because 9 times out of 10, I guarantee you, there's like some fantastic tutorial, and the last, 10% of it is like maybe like a half decent tutorial that you can make your way through and get that code in there. So for that little bit there was just our really quick intro into web analytics, because I wanted everybody to take some time and set up their Google Analytics account, and set it up on a page so that you're ready to go for next week's lecture, and a lot of it will be so much clearer that way. So let's now discuss our discussion for week 3. So what percentage of your time do you think you should be spending on analysis and reporting? So I'm going to create the discussion like I did in the last one, that everybody is speaking on the same thread there. But I did give the example of I'm in there multiple times a day. You could dedicate an hour a week. Maybe you check in twice a week. So in terms of, versus the total amount of time you're spending on social, what percentage of that time do you think that you should be taking a fairly close look at your reporting and your metrics and your numbers? And, really ask each other questions, have examples. You can ask me questions. I read all the comments, and I can speak to, if you're looking for any real world examples from my perspective, I can definitely bring those in. And I know a lot of people in the course could also bring real world examples to the table. Now let's talk about assignment 2. So assignment 2 is going to be really fun. You're actually going to be building a dashboard just through a Google Doc this time, but just so you're already starting to think of what numbers do I need to be watching, what are my goals, what are my KPIs, what are my tactical metrics, just to get you in that frame of mind of piecing it all together so that when it comes time to do this for a social account, you are armed and ready to put this all together with complete confidence and ease. So for assignment 2, what's in your dashboard? So like I mentioned, the purpose of the assignment is to get you thinking about how your metrics, or about your metrics and like how to measure your marketing activities. And so when you finish this assignment, you'll have a basic outline of how to plan your goal-based measurement approach. And like I said, I want you to feel confident when you're doing this as part of a marketing team or with a client or whatever the case may be that you're managing a social account. So briefly introduce your business is how you're going to start off the assignment. I recommend using a real business because you'll be able to have more insights and context and real world thinking and examples to help you fill in the data and come up with the tactics. So just summarize the business in 1 to 3 sentences. It really doesn't have to be like a whole pitch on the business or a whole explanation of the business. It just needs to You just need to make it clear to me what the business's purpose is. Is it for, are they selling a CPG product? Are they aiming for enrollment in a course? Whatever the case may be, I just need to understand that in that 1 to 3 sentences. In the next section of the assignment, you're going to define your business goals. So we just need 3 for the purposes of the assignment. If you need examples of good goals, I would recommend looking back to our lecture where we used Aldo Shoes as an example, and we talked about, their quarterly sales goals, and then we broke that down into tactics. Or you can use the SMART Goals resources, which is in the a link to it is in our full description of the assignment in Blackboard. So just go ahead and click on that. I can give you some insight also, but if you need an example to help understand, go back to our lecture where we used Aldo, and that can really help you with a great example to pull together your goals. So then you're going to look to what KPIs will allow you to measure your progress on these goals. So like I mentioned, go back to that week 2 lecture that discusses the importance of differentiating between regular metrics and KPIs, and then aim for 1 to 3 KPIs per goal. So for example, if we were looking at Aldo Shoes, we were talking about the quarterly goal of increasing their sales on their summer line, let's say. What were the assigned KPIs to meet that goal? And so that's a really good way to think about it. So go back to those examples. It really helps outline it to understand how to break it down from goals to KPIs. And what are your tactics to achieve these goals? And then it's like the next layer that we're breaking it down. So list the 3 to 5 tactics. Is it an email campaign? Is it social content that's promoted content? Whatever the tactics that you need to meet the KPIs to then meet the goals. And then what are the tactic level metrics that you need to measure for those tactics you just outlined? So this assignment is a maximum of 2 pages, single spaced. So anything longer than 2 pages will not be graded. The goal is to make it, simple and to the point and really clear what your goals are, what the business is, and outlining the dashboard. Also, there is an example in the full explanation of the assignment and a rubric. So I really do recommend using the example template as a template and filling in your data. So that's why we built it that way, so that you can easily copy that template and then build out your data that way. And of course have to customize it to what your set tactics are and then the metrics that you're reporting on. But it's a really clean, simple to read dashboard that I think you all will enjoy getting to fill in yourselves. So the full explanation of the assignment The links are in Dashboard and in our folder on Google Drive. So you can find all more data there. And then also we do have a lot of additional resources for this week in particular, because there's so much more to read for the web analytics perspective, and then there'll be more next week also. So thanks so much, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this lecture. Go ahead and look for those resources in the assignment, and looking forward to everyone's conversation and chatter in the discussion boards. Have a great week, everyone.